Good morning, River Rocks. This is Don, and this morning I'm blessed to be taking us through Job chapter 33. So in the previous several chapters, Job and his friends have been arguing back and forth because his friends believe that Job's either been an unrighteous man or he's committed some type of sin, and for that God's punishing him. And Job keeps defending himself and telling them he is a righteous man. But he keeps thinking that God is somehow just afflicting him for no reason. Now, Elihu is not one of his friends, and in chapter 32, Elihu seems to come out of nowhere. But he says that he's been listening to everything that they've been saying, and he gets angered because he's like completely for God, and he believes that the Spirit of God is leading him to basically rebuke all of them. And in chapter 32, he rebuked the three friends because they keep accusing Job of some type of unrighteousness, but they can't prove it, but yet they still condemn him. And now in chapter 33, Elihu turns his attention to Job, and he's actually claiming that Job's sin is not in that he committed some form of unrighteousness and he's being punished for that, but his sin is in how he believes the Lord's afflicting him for what's being done. And he's pleading with Job to listen to him. And he makes his case by stating that, his intentions are pure, his heart is pure. He's here to try to convince Job to repent. And he wants to bring the truth to him. So if we look in verses 8 through 13, Elihu tells Job, "Surely you have spoken in my hearing, and I have heard the sound of your words, saying, I am pure, without transgression. I am innocent, and there is no iniquity in me. Yet he finds occasion against me. He counts me as his enemy. He puts my feet in the stocks. He watches all my paths. Look, in this you are not righteous. I will answer you, for God is greater than man. Why do you contend with him? For he does not give an accounting of any of his words." So what Elihu's doing here is he's rebuking Job because he's blaming God, and he's bringing God down to a man's level, like God would have to answer to him. And he's telling Job, look, God doesn't answer to any of us. He's God, and he can do whatever he wants. But then he shifts and he starts to tell Job that, look, God uses things to discipline men. And he gives a few examples. Like the first one is he says that God will give men visions and dreams and use different methods to convince them to turn away from their sin. And because sin leads you to the pit is what they call it. We might think of that as hell. So the first example was about God speaking to man in visions and dreams to get them to turn back from sin. He says another way that God can do this is by allowing pain and allowing sickness and things like that as a form of chastening, to turn men away from their sin, because ultimately sin will lead to eternal death. And it's far more important to have somebody repent, even if that means painful chastening. And then the interesting thing is Elijah talks about a messenger, a mediator. And in this chapter, he's likely referring to himself, like God sent him to be a mediator to convince Job to turn back from his attitude that he has towards God at this point, so that he could be restored to righteousness. And he uses words like a mediator who would provide a ransom and would restore righteousness to man. And that really brings us to mind, almost like it's a foreshadowing of what Jesus is going to do for us. And because Jesus was our mediator, he was the ransom to redeem us. And he, through what he did on the cross and through the shedding of his blood, he basically restored righteousness to man. So we see that happening here. And as a result, man would see that he's sinful, would confess his sins, and then he would repent. And that's how he would be saved. So we look at verses 29 and 30. It says, "Behold, God works all these things twice, in fact, 3 times with a man, to bring back his soul from the pit, that he may be enlightened with the light of life." So God does all these things in our lives basically to turn us away from sin. He's not the kind of God who's just going to give us what we want and let us just go on into sin. If we belong to God, if we're his child, he's going to do whatever it takes to turn us away from evil and wickedness, or anytime we stray away from him. He doesn't want any man to perish, but He wants everyone to repent and be saved. And he'll do whatever it takes. And discipline and chastening from the Lord is a part of that. So if we look at Hebrews chapter 12, verses 5b through 8, it says, "My son, do not despise the chastening of the Lord, nor be discouraged when you are rebuked by him. For whom the Lord loves, he chastens, and scourges every son whom he receives. If you endure chastening, God deals with you as with sons. For what son is there whom a father does not chasten? But if you are without chastening, of which all have become partakers, then you are illegitimate and not sons." So we see here that chastening of the Lord is actually love. It's him turning us away from the things that are destructive in our lives, such as sin. So Elihu's telling Job, basically, God is not against you. He's not doing these things to you. If anything, this could be a form of chastening by the Lord, and that he's doing it to turn Job away from his sin. So what is it that we can take away from this? The first thing is we should never judge God. We should never question his motives or question the things that happen to our life or accuse God of causing those things to happen, because we know that the character of God is love and mercy and goodness. And if there's anything going on in our lives, God's doing it for our own good. We should never blame him for the things that we go through, but instead we should seek him out through those times. We should be seeking his strength, his will, and praying that whatever his will is for the things that we're going through, the trials, that they would come to pass and that he would bring us through those. So I hope this blessed you, and I hope you have a great day, and we will see you soon. Bye.